In this episode, we speak with Jennifer Fleiss, co-founder and board member of Rent the Runway, an online clothing rental service that is changing the way people get dressed by offering access to high-end fashion at a fraction of the cost. Rent the Runway is disrupting the trillion-dollar fashion industry with its Closet in the Cloud, the world's first and largest shared designer closet. Jennifer co-founded the company in 2008 and played a pivotal role in its early growth as president, head of logistics, and head of business development. She led strategic planning, fundraising, operations, and partnerships, helping scale the startup from concept to category-defining brand. Under her leadership, Rent the Runway built a powerful platform that merges fashion, technology, and logistics to deliver designer clothing to millions of people across the country. I'm your host, RJ Lumba. We hope you enjoy the show. If you like the episode, click to follow.
RJ Lumba is the executive chairman of Market Insight Media and the managing partner of GrowthCap. He is the host of Great Entrepreneurs, a podcast for driven entrepreneurs and business owners. Our podcast covers all topics related to the entrepreneurial journey, from ideation to execution to optimization and to reaping the rewards of a well-run business. In the minutes ahead, we'll share with you unique insights and tactics from some of today's most accomplished and inspiring entrepreneurs.
Jennifer, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It's a delight to be with you.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So it's interesting. We speak with a variety of entrepreneurs across different industries, primarily in tech. But the first question I had here was, at the time when you were coming up with this idea, or maybe with your co-founders coming up with the idea of Rent the Runway, what was going through your head? Or was it like so clear to you that the idea of Rent the Runway had to come to fruition? It was inevitable that something like this would exist.
I don't think it's ever like fully inevitable that something that's totally new and disruptive will exist. For us, it was a combination of ourselves understanding the consumer because we were the consumer, which I think is a very healthy way to drive passion and insight for an idea that you're building. Talking to a ton of other peers and would-be consumers as well to make sure it wasn't just us and our perspectives. And then really understanding the market dynamics. So when we started working on Rent the Runway, it was November 2008. There was a recession at that moment. There was a lot of designers and brands who were struggling with how to keep their businesses alive, putting things on sale. And then you had consumers who were looking at alternate ways of continuing to look great and shop without breaking the bank. And so Zara, H&M, fast fashion started to emerge as one of those solutions. And so I think with that market dynamic combined with our consumer insights, we were able to feel that this was at least a business idea that merited some work. And so I think from there, you go out and you put that concept out there in front of a customer in real life, see if they'll pay for it. And only then, I think, are you kind of armed with the conviction to say, like, this is inevitable. This has to exist.
There's another layer deeper here in making the decision to become an entrepreneur. You were in finance beforehand. Around the same time, not sure if you know this, but there was someone else at Lehman Brothers who was trying to figure out whether or not to make the leap to becoming an entrepreneur. And I spoke with this person at the time. It was, call it around 2007, 2008. Fast forward, his name is John Zimmer, who started Lyft. But he was debating, oh man, I got offered a third-year analyst position, but I have this crazy idea to start this carpooling company.
Right.
And I said, you can go do it. You can always come back to finance. So tell us about that process, your confidence to leave finance or something more traditional in business.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that about John, but I think it's definitely interesting when you have environments that in ways kind of can spur on entrepreneurship. And so I think that speaks volume of the culture and some of the leaders, I think, that probably were around the time of both of our being at Lehman. I was at business school at that time. And I think for me, the recession was actually a part of it. When there's a recessionary moment, jobs are also impacted. And so your options and what you can make in alternate career paths are reduced. And so when you're kind of trying to balance that trade-off of like, do I take this risk, make little or no money working on my own idea, or go into whatever jobs are out there in the ecosystem? If there's not a great alternate option that's getting you super jazzed and excited, it's much easier for people around that time to be convinced to like, well, let me just give it a try, right? And I think, John's case for sure, the timing with Lehman Brothers, like I think it kind of like says it all in an extreme way of it's a great moment to kind of go and try something different. And it just reduces almost what you're sacrificing and the risk on the other side of the equation. I did have another job option that I'd worked really hard to identify and tee up, and I was pretty excited about, and it was going to be working at a startup. So I had already triangulated that if I wasn't ready with my own idea, I wanted to go work somewhere else. And so for me, knowing that I had this entrepreneurial tendency, it was more about when did I have my own idea and when did I feel ready enough as an individual to go out on my own versus to be a chief of staff or to work inside of another entrepreneurial business. And I think that raising venture capital for me was a part of that equation. I knew that Rent the Runway would need capital to purchase inventory and put up a website that felt very aspirational. And I was not an engineer, so I couldn't do that myself. And so just to get enough funding to buy the inventory to be a legitimate site, the next step was going to be to raise venture funding. And so I put that as like a gating factor to say, like, this is our no-go decision. It becomes like this mile marker where you kind of make a decision by a certain date when this event happens. And it keeps you, I think, really honest and saying, I'm doing this in a way that, yes, hopefully I learn and it's enjoyable for my life, but there's a real intention to make money and make a career out of this.
Well, you raised a lot of capital, during your journey there. Did the capital come fairly quickly? Did it kind of meet your expectations in terms of timing? Did it take longer? Curious about the whole kind of journey with investors.
I was putting one foot in front of the next. My co-founder and I had never raised or tried to raise capital before. So I can't tell you that there was any sense of expectations beyond what we learned in business school of how long it should or would take. Our first round of financing, probably from conversations to dollars in the bank, was about 5 or 6 months, maybe more like 3 months till when we had a term sheet in hand, and then you have to get through all the closing stuff. And everything felt like it was going super fast and at lightning speed. But I think I had no conception of whether that was fast or slow on average. It was just the timeline that we needed before we needed to either quit, our other jobs that we were planning to start. So we were graduating business school at the time. We knew our jobs were going to start in mid-June. And it was like, can we get a term sheet before we graduate? Can we get money in the bank before we were supposed to start these jobs? So that the safety net was still there until we had the definitive funding was more the variable that we looked at. And I often say to entrepreneurs, you're kind of always fundraising in some way, both because a lot of venture and high growth businesses do require a lot of capital, but also because even when you legitimately aren't taking capital, you're still fielding conversations with investors, or you're just meeting them in the course of your life, or you're interacting with your own investors who may put in future capital and funding. So that's kind of a gene that always needs to be on. We had both our second and third round of financing preempted, where we actually had like investors coming and showing up at our office, even though we were like very much not, needing capital or raising money, which is a good example of that. So those couple of rounds, I'd say, came very easy because we had conversations really with like one firm in each of those examples who came in with a really attractive offer. And then, I think up until like the subsequent rounds that we raised, were also like, for me, it didn't feel like it was pulling teeth. Obviously, every moment of time is very different in what it means for people's ability to raise. And so I think we were at a phase of fundraising where venture funding was on the up and it was a bit easier versus today, for example, to raise capital. Of course, now it's in the public market and that's its own different animal and beast to adjust to.
And it seems like you had, as you were kind of going through the process, you had probably things mapped out of what you needed to do to be in a good position to bring in the capital. So aside from the capital, now like switching over to the operations, what did you find to be the most challenging?
Yeah, the piece that was absolutely the most challenging was the logistics. I still think it's the hardest part of this business, the secret sauce of a business like Rent the Runway that enables you to scale. So building out a warehouse, a dry cleaning ecosystem, a process to get products in and out of your warehouse as quickly as possible so that you're optimizing utilization, automating parts of the process, but making those smart investment decisions and trade-offs, thinking about a second facility and how to bifurcate inventory to best service different geographic areas. Like there's just endless ways to optimize and things to consider, which, I wound up leading our operations and warehouse for almost 4 years. And I hadn't done that previously, but it was just an area that was clearly so critical for us. It became a bottleneck in terms of our processing speed and abilities. And it was this like blue sky, always new opportunities. So for someone very entrepreneurial like me, there was always something new to invent and optimize and consider in a way that no one had done before. So it didn't work when we tried to hire folks who worked at Amazon and had kind of Six Sigma, all these best practices that they had studied and learned. We actually needed to do something in a different way because we were doing reverse logistics. Everything that came in came out, and there was a lot of manual quality control inspecting and aspects that we've now since automated, but that are very unique to what our business model is and are for sure a competitive advantage and a big moat that I think has warded off other competitors from getting to this place of scale.
Were there some unique insights that kind of unfolded along the way, maybe in terms of certain products, in terms of ski gear or, ski clothing? That's another area, or
Mhm.
was that one was pretty much on your map?
There was constantly learnings that we had from our customers. And so I think our business, and this is what I try to do with the company that I work on right now with my kids, it's called Roll Rider. That is
Mhm.
also inspired by customer insights. The businesses I worked on for Walmart, also like always starting with those customer insights and then working from there to build a business and continue to refine based on that customer feedback. So we actually at Rent the Runway call our customer service team customer insights, right? Because really the idea is that it's not just a way to help them, but you're constantly learning about what things do we need to make more clear so people don't have questions. What other things do customers want that we currently don't offer? So with from our customers that we learned about, like people want long dresses, and they actually had the idea of like, what if you pre-alter them in different lengths so that it makes it easy to actually enable people to have those dresses? People wanted accessories, necklaces, earrings, bracelets, rings. So we started adding that. And then if you keep talking to customers, you can learn more about how else could we help you in your lives. And our customers, and again, we were and are our customers, we related to this, which helps. We're starting to grow into an age where it wasn't just weddings and black tie benefits that they were attending. It was a power meeting at work. It was a baby shower, something that like maybe required a slightly less formal set of attire and a different price point and way of engaging, which led us to some of our inventory evolution into products like jeans and blazers and sweaters, and eventually also our subscription model.
This business grew out of what you were experiencing, it sounds like personally. And I recently heard someone giving a talk about how you can't always focus on what your needs are. You should be focusing on what the client's needs are. In some cases, they're the same. But I'm curious if you have a view on that. Like, there's many entrepreneurs out there that produce something that doesn't relate to them. They're just focused more on the business as like a machine that produces a product or service. Do you have a view on that? And maybe it relates
Yeah,
to
I have
passion
like
too.
a pretty strong bias. I think the best entrepreneurs are their own customer. I think you can still be a very successful business person. And sometimes the benefit of maybe being a bit removed can let you optimize, do a business turnaround once a business is later stage. But I think to truly be like pioneering a new industry, disrupting an industry, to have the passion that being your own consumer brings, as well as like the constant always on thinking from that perspective of the customer is incredibly powerful. So like I don't think that men could have started a business like Rent the Runway as an example. The pressure that women face in the face of social media, the joy and the feeling of confidence that women get when they put on a great outfit, understanding what it is to pair an awesome outfit with the right necklace and to try out a new style that maybe is a bit more emboldening and empowering, and how that could unlock different energy in someone. I think that was really the key to building this experiential business, which is how we think about Rent the Runway. And there were so many instances where we would say, okay, like, how do we get more people to convert, right? More people coming to our site to try Rent the Runway, and you talk to customers and they are somewhat concerned about fit. And so we're like, okay, we get it. We relate to that. But you dig in and you realize, because you relate to the customer, it's not just about fit, it's about, will the item look good on me? And so our best way of solving that was actually through photo reviews of customers. We looked at all the fit technology, like put in your numbers and let's spit out how this looks on you. And we're like, that's not actually what women want and what they relate to. So when they say they want it to fit, it's more like, can I envision someone who I relate to, who I maybe view as aspirational, but who isn't the size zero model? They have a similar body type, and let me hear from their authentic voice about their experience and see their measurements as they tell them to us, to understand if this is a product I believe will work for me. And that instance of evolution with photo reviews, which at the time was a big risk, because others were not doing it, it doubled our conversion, just to give you a sense. But I think it was that subtlety of taking the quantitative insights that we collected, but also that qualitative overlay of being the customer ourselves.
Now, switching gears to what you're currently focused on, Roll Rider, and it's a business that you're doing with your kids. So tell us about how this idea came about and what is it about working with your kids that you're particularly drawn to?
Yeah, so traveling with my family has always been something I've felt passionate about. I think it's a moment of so many special memories. And just in the way that Rent the Runway is connected to special memories and moments in people's lives, I love it when a business is connected to these moments of memories and enjoyments. I think that's how really powerful brands can get made. And that's how you spur on like a word of mouth conversation where you're talking to other people about a product. So it's actually great for marketing. When we were traveling to Europe with our kids for the first time ever, it was an exciting moment. And yet it became very stressful, right? Packing bags, thinking of all the bags, winding up carrying your kids' bags for them, as well as, lifting my 2-year-old while we're going through the airport. And so what should be a fun, exciting moment, the very start of that trip can easily become very stressful. And we looked for different alternatives, and we did discover that there were some of these scooter bags, and we let my older kids try them out. And the idea was great. And for the first 5 minutes, they were the best thing ever. And people would comment and talk to us about them. But the products kept falling short in little ways, right? Whether they were hard to turn or they broke and they didn't last the next time, or the kid outgrew them, or they couldn't fit enough stuff in the packing space that they had available. But we're like, there's totally a way to do this better. There is an opportunity here. And it wasn't just us as the customers, but it was 30 people on average. I started counting every time we entered an airport would say something to us about the product. So everyone kind of were like this wow product where the need and the utility was very clear, as well as the joy and the smiles that it brings to people's face. So after, no exaggeration, like 5 years of the same experience, we tried several different scooter suitcase versions. We always tried to love them, would go to the airport, have people compliment and be so excited to see this product. And I was like, why doesn't this exist? Why isn't anyone else doing this? It must be a regulation in the airport. I researched that. It wasn't a regulation. And finally, I was like, oh my God, this is what I always preach to my kids. If you have a great idea, you're passionate about it for an extended period of time, you can relate to the customer. And this is how companies are started. And so I was like, why don't we work on this? And, my safety net, because I do often think as an entrepreneur about what is the backup plan, the safety net, I was like, worst case, I'm bootstrapping this and I'll spend some money on it, but I'm going to get to teach my kids what I think is the greatest lesson of all, which is how to build and start real businesses, the empowering feeling of creating something that you can then see real customers using out in the world. And finally, the fact that you can love what you do. Mm-hmm. I don't think until I started working on, maybe lemonade stands, but really Rent the Runway, that I realized that you could so purely have so much fun and enjoy what you do as a job. Homework can easily just seem like a total chore and task. And so I think the biggest gift that right now I'm hoping to give my kids as we learn together about building this scooter suitcase product and selling it at Walmart and Target, on our Shopify site, on Amazon, launching new products, new travel accessories we're working on. But the biggest gift that I hope to give them is just showing them how much they can truly love whatever they choose to do in life. And that feels great. That feels like how you actually want to spend every minute of your time if you get it right.
That's amazing. And so it's pretty clear that the approach is different. You're bootstrapping, you're working with your kids. Do you plan for it to be solely owned in the family for the foreseeable future?
I would really like that to be the case. I never think too far out in entrepreneurship, and I'm sure that's a controversial thing. From an investor, you are thinking a bit farther out. Market size always matters. You always want that gut check that there's enough potential customers and some consideration on at what price point. But I find that the most realistic thing is kind of more planning about 6 months out, whether it's the inventory that you're needing, what are the issues you're going to have to confront. And I think often if you do too much more than that, it can easily be very overwhelming. I say to entrepreneurs, the biggest gift is actually being somewhat naive. And part of the beauty in starting this business is I myself had never started a business that had a physical product created overseas. This product is created in China. It has engineering aspects to it. We've had to create molds. I've had to then learn about connecting to inventory systems for Target and Walmart and working with different third-party logistics providers and negotiating shipping rates. So I had never built on the Shopify platform. So the learnings are huge. Working with investors, I had seen what that route looks like. It is a whole can of worms. So in some ways, it's great, especially if you need a big amount of dollars upfront, but I do believe there's other ways to build a business. And if you don't need, $1 million plus from the get-go, as we did for Rent the Runway, to have a legitimate amount of inventory and disrupt an industry and build the relationship with designers and the credibility from designers to trust us because they saw that we were like partnered with Bain Capital. If you're a business like mine, where I can float the cost of like the inventory essentially upfront and spend some of my own time with a very lean or no team running this, then like the risk is much lower. I'm not putting that much capital out. And at least for now, I don't have to deal with managing investors and meetings and conversations and certain legal structuring documents. There's a lot of like hassle and overhead that I'm glad that I don't have to have in my life at this moment. And I just think it's like the fit for whatever you're building and what the actual capital needs are. That is a piece of determining whether you're going to need to raise capital.
We're coming up on time. I have two final questions. Before I hit on those questions, do you think entrepreneurs are born or made?
I do think it can be both. So like I describe myself as a born entrepreneur. That said, before I could even remember, like my dad is an entrepreneur and I was living and breathing and around that and his energy that I'm sure impacted kind of my 5-year-old self wanting to do lemonade stands. My co-founder for Rent the Runway would tell you that she did not consider herself an entrepreneur and didn't think of herself that way. And yet I will tell you that even when she was at large corporations before Rent the Runway, she was doing entrepreneurship. She was doing entrepreneurial things inside. And so I do think there's even parts of her that had natural aspects of entrepreneurship. For me, and I think her, I didn't realize that you could be lucky enough to have it be your job. So I often had entrepreneurial side hustles, but growing up in New York where entrepreneurship wasn't as much of a thing until a decade ago, it was like that was a nice, fun hobby and maybe some extra cash that you could make by like tutoring kids for college or something, but I didn't know that that could actually be my, full-time job. And we all know that in a larger extent now. And so there's a lot more people going after that journey.
Last two questions. One is, can you tell us about a person who has had a profound influence on you?
Gosh, I just spent the day with my dad yesterday, and for sure, he's got the hustle factor, the idea that kind of anything is possible, anything can happen element to him, right? It's much more of like a yes mentality, where there's a will, there's a way was like an expression I grew up with. And so this like figure it out aspect. But I've been very grateful and lucky to have my co-founder I view as a form of a mentor, Jen Hyman, who, she had a sales and marketing background. I learned a ton from her about sales marketing, and she's, a visionary thinker. Mark Laurie has been a mentor advisor and, boss colleague of mine as well. And I think he is so great at finding that customer problem and then like working backwards to that ideal solution and thinking in a very formulaic way about entrepreneurship. So I've been able to integrate that. Diane von Furstenberg took our earliest email, like totally blind, and responded to it and has been a mentor to our business and a big part of why the company exists. So luckily, I found a lot of these people that have been a key portion of my journey and what I hope to pay forward in this next chapter of my career.
Last question. Can you tell us about a charity, cause, or other endeavor that you're passionate about?
I just went to a breakfast this morning for the Women's Health Foundation, which is an organization my friend started. And I do think, as I've become a woman in my 40s, one thing pertinent on my mind, my peers' mind, is just like you're going through perimenopause, menopause, and there's a lot of hormone replacement therapy and knowledge that just women, we aren't armed with. And a lot of doctors aren't armed and trained with this knowledge specifically for women. And it really impacts day-to-day health, mood, ability to remember, to be productive, and to actually do your work. So I've become really passionate about that. And then I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurial organizations at Yale, where I'm on the board of Yale Ventures, at Harvard Business School. So trying to just think about the right ways to inject entrepreneurship in different curriculums and to continue to give entrepreneurs tools and feedback so they can build the best, most impactful businesses.
Excellent. Well, Jennifer, I want to thank you again for taking the time. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah, likewise. I enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.